Hello everybody. I got some really good feedback on the Spitfire Mark 14 comparison video, and it's prompted me to make another one of those videos on the more misunderstood airplanes of the IL-2 Great Battle series. So today we're going to take a look at 1C's implementation of the P-38J-25. We're going to look at the specific variant, some of my gripes I have with that variant. It won't be as much of a history lesson because we're not comparing two models where the history of each is super relevant to how to fly them, but we'll look at some footage, actually a lot of footage, some really good footage that I think is going to be pretty exciting and highlights how to fly the airplane pretty well. So stick with me, let's get into this. I hope you all enjoyed yet again, thank you for the great reception on that Spitfire video, and let's take this away. So the P-38 version that we get in IL-2 Great Battles as a collector aircraft for Battle of Bodenplatte is the P-38J-25, which is the pinnacle of the J series, which was the version of the P-38 introduced in mid-1943 to rectify a lot of the issues that have been had with the earlier P-38s. Yet again, I'm not going to get super into the technical details of this aircraft. Greg has a phenomenal video on the P-38 and a lot of its design features and a lot of the issues it faced in real life and how they were rectified. So yet again, I will be giving a little drop-down menu with his video. If you want to know more about the nitty-gritty stuff of the P-38, I could suggest you go check him out. However, my issues with the P-38 in IL-2 start right here. And it's the fact that for a late 1944 through spring of 1945 expansion, 1C has given us a version of the P-38 that was, yes, present at the battle or during this, operational time, but isn't really the definitive version of the P-38 and isn't the version that I think they should have given us for this time period. If they'd been doing a 1943 expansion, I would have totally backed the 38J coming as the collector's aircraft, but I think because they're aiming for a late 44 one, we really should have received what is the pinnacle of P-38 design, the P-38L. Now, a lot of people say there isn't a huge amount of difference. The P-38J-25 has the dive brakes that the P-38L also has, and that's kind of the major defining factor of the P-38L. But what the P-38L also has is increased horsepower. It produces 16,000 horsepower per engine compared to the 1450 per engine that the 38J25 produces. So you get a more horsepower, and more horsepower means it's more competitive, especially in a late war environment where speed is king, right? So that's my first gripe, is I think that 1C really added the wrong version of the airplane. I don't have a specific issue with the 38J. I think the 38J is a beautiful plane. I really enjoy flying the 38J, even in the late war scenarios. I still make it work, and in 1943, 1944 scenarios, it's a very good airplane. But I really think that we probably should have gotten the 38L for Battle of Bodenplatte. Now, I know some people might say, well, did they add this because it's the most produced version of the P-38? Did they add this to make sure that this airplane could be used in earlier war situations and later war situations? And to that I have to say that no, the P-38J, specifically the P-38J-25, isn't the most produced version of the P-38. The P-38L is. And as to whether or not it was added so that it could be, used in earlier situations, my counter to that would be, if it's an expansion for a late war battle, it should be a late war version. In the same way that, the German collector's aircraft wasn't a mid-war version of the 190, it was a late-war version of the D9. However, I'm okay with that. The J was in service with the 9th Tactical Air Force, 9th Tactical Air Command. 9th Tactical Air Force is not a formation. The 370th Fighter Group and I believe the 474th Fighter Group both flew them throughout the end of February 1945 when they converted over to P-51. So during the Operation Nordwind and the strike on Allied air power, specifically Allied air bases in northwestern Europe, there were P-38s being used still actively, even though the majority of 8th and 9th Air Force's fighter groups had transitioned over to the P-51. The P-38 during this time period was being heavily used as a fighter bomber, which is replicable in game. You can carry a lot of ordnance, and this is a good time to segue on to the modifications you can throw on this thing. You can throw some Zook rockets, you can throw a wide variety of 1,000 pound bombs, I believe some 2,000 pound bombs. I never fly this thing in a ground strike configuration, so that's my bad. This video is not for the point of teaching you how to use the 38 in a ground strike role. You can get some extra ammo, and I believe you can also add in a radio compass as well. I'm trying to make these videos a little briefer. The other one was almost 30 minutes long, and I just don't think that's great for your guys' engagement, and I want to make these as consumable and easy to digest as possible. So I'm not going to go over the technical operation of the airplane. If you are watching this, I'm kind of yet again assuming under the assumption that you have already bought the airplane, you've already tried the airplane, you've already struggled in the airplane, and have probably already watched Requiem's video on the technical operation of the plane. If you haven't, I will put a little drop down menu so that you can watch that. I would suggest going to watch that prior to finishing this video, and then after you've watched that, you can come back and really learn the combat aspect of this plane. However, one key thing I do want to reiterate that he mentions over there is the fact that you have dive brakes in this thing. Like I said earlier, the P-38J-25 was the pinnacle of the J line, and it introduced the dive brakes into the production airplanes as a way to counteract some of the controllability issues that the P-38 had in a dive. The P-38 was not phenomenal in a dive, which is kind of counter to what people expect. They think, oh, big twin-engined airplane, it's going to do very well in a dive. It doesn't. It locks up a lot. At about 420 miles per hour, you are going to really suffer a lot of controllability issues. That's actually the wall. I would not extend past that. So things like 109s will outdive you, things like 190s will outdive you. So you have a very hard time in a dive, and I would make sure that you have your dive brake keys bound, because if you're trying to have any kind of extended diving capability, you need them if you want to pull up. So it allows for a 45-degree sustained dive with them on, and if you don't have them on, you can only sustain a 15-degree dive. Yet again, I don't want to bother you guys with the technical details of the operation of the aircraft. Requiem notes all of the settings that you're going to want to adhere to in game in his video, but I do like to show you guys these little graphs, these reports that I sometimes find, and of course, as always, links to the sources will be in the description. But here we can see the war emergency power speed ratings and level flight at different altitudes, so altitude compared to airspeed. The left line that you can see there is the engines running at 60 inches of manifold pressure on 3000 RPM, and the right one is 70 inches of manifold pressure at 3000 RPM. Now this isn't for a J-25, this is actually for a J-10, but there's no difference in the engines. Yet again, like I said, the only difference is really the dive brakes. So you can see that at roughly 20,000 feet, running 70 inches of manifold pressure, you can get about 419 miles per hour, which isn't super fast, but like I said, if you're using this aircraft in a 1943 situation, that's pretty good, and actually I think at that altitude, there's almost nothing that can catch you from the Axis side. So here's the next report I want to show you guys just briefly. Yet again, you can go down into the description and follow the source link to look at this yourself, or just pause the video. But you can see that on the left you have, yet again, 60 inches of manifold pressure operating at 3000 RPM, and the right line is 70 inches of manifold pressure operating at 300 RPM as well. And you can see they converge eventually at around 22,000 feet. But for the most part, you're staying at roughly 3,500 feet per minute throughout most altitudes up till you get to 22,000 feet, where you drop down to 2,800, and the ideal is at about 5,000 feet, you can actually get around 4,000 RPM out of it if you're running the 70 inches of manifold pressure with a 3,000 RPM. Now, granted, those aren't standard climb settings. That is in war emergency power, so I would not run that for an extended amount of time. The P-38 only has about 15 minutes of combined war emergency power in the engines before you have to stop running it for fear of over revving the engines and breaking it. Although given in IL-2 you don't have to worry about engine longevity because you're not flying, you know, upwards of 50 missions on these engines, you can over rev that a little bit more. Now let's get to the meat and potatoes of why we're all here: how to fly the P-38 in combat. And the name of the game is speed and energy, and making sure that you always have them, and when you don't, leaving or attempting to disengage. Decision making is really big in the P-38. Johannes Steinhoff, who was a German fighter ace during the Second World War, stated that he didn't like to turn with the 109's G6 against the P-38 because the P-38 would actually outturn the G6 at certain speeds. And this is true. Between 280 to about 200 miles per hour, you will outturn a G6. The thing is, just don't get slow. The P-38 turns well, but you shouldn't use all of your turn at once. For example here, I turn just enough to get guns on target. Once I get my shot, I extend out so I can high yo-yo him if he's still alive. He's not, I killed him, but the point still stands. So let's talk airplane profiles and generally how to beat them. The first one I want to talk about is the BF-109G series. You can outturn the 109G at roughly 280 miles per hour in the first couple of turns. In a sustained turn fight, the P-38 is going to get pretty slow, and then the 109 will start outrating you. But in the first couple, you can absolutely get him. If you're running 70 inches of manifold pressure at 3,000 RPM, you actually will, for a short amount of time, outclimb him. You cannot sustain outclimb him, but you will outclimb him. You also can roll with him. It's a pretty equal fight if you keep towards your ideal speed and you play the airplane well. Don't be afraid to extend out. Don't be afraid to use bigger turns. You absolutely have to use bigger turns. Use a lot of the vertical in the airplane. Don't be hogging the guy. Don't be trying to get guns on all the time. It's okay to lag turn. The second one I want to talk about is actually the airplane I'm engaging here. I've spotted a 190A over a friendly airfield, and he's being lit up by flak. Just look at this nice trail of black puffs lighting him up for me. I've been trailing him. I've dove in on him from about 18,000 feet, so I've got a lot of speed here. There's almost nothing he can do to me here. We're at an altitude where he has no advantage. The Anton loses the P-38 in every way above about 10,000 feet. On the deck, the Anton is faster than you. The only way he can really, hold an edge to me is if he tries to really aggressively roll fight with me. But even then, as long as I'm careful with my throttle and I use my rudders, he's not really a threat, and there's almost nothing he can do. So yet again, you can see me just using throttles. I overstalled the airplane a little bit there. It's okay. He didn't really capitalize on that, so I guess I got lucky. But yet again, some very brave shots right there. There's probably no likelihood that any of those were ever going to hit. But this guy is really... he's not playing it super aggro. So if you were an Anton player and you asked me how would I get a 38 off of my back, I would say this I would say be a bit more a bit aggressive. Use a little bit more of the vertical here. He's rolling in the horizontal a lot. If he tried to dive to this deck, he can actually kind of abuse my dive limitations I talked about earlier. He does here, but he makes a mistake. He's going to pull back up into my guns, which I don't understand this. And then right here, he's going to understand why, 4 nose-mounted 50 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon is a devastating array of weaponry to get on target. And that's Splash 1 Anton. Unfortunately, he didn't play that very well, but it does highlight to you how dominant you can be over an A Series 190 in the P-38. Now, this next clip highlights why I like to call the airplane the thinking man's plane. It shows how much patience you have to have with the P-38 and how you cannot be hungry to pull back on the stick. So we're over the English Channel right now. It's me and a buddy, Scrubby, who I fly with pretty often, and we're teaching him the P-38. We spot a bunch of bogeys here. We think it's about 4 to 5 enemies. In reality, it's 2 enemies and an absolute load of friendlies who were not on SRS communicating, even though I was calling and asking for positions, which is another big thing, guys. If you're flying IL-2, Always try to hop on SRS if you can. It's really good to have information. Anyway, one of those friendlies we know is a P-38. That's not Scrubby right there. That's a different one who gets downed. Anyway, so I roll into him. You can see how that high-speed roll rate's pretty good. I'm pulling onto him. I judge it's too much of a pull for me, and I don't want to waste my energy, so I extend out. Scrubby calls he's got a tail. I pass him right here. I'm turning up to try to get an ID on his tail. It's a P-51. Now, I turn back in, and I'm going to help him clear because now he's concerned he has a 109 on his tail. So I'm slotting back in, and I'm trying to clear him. I get bad intel here over the one guy who is on SRS that the streamer is not the P-38 that got hit earlier, but is actually a 109 that's been hit more recently. So I don't prosecute him right here. I turn in, and I'm asking, hey, who's on fire, who's on fire? And somebody's calling it's a 109, and that the 38 we saw get hit earlier has already gone in. So I don't prosecute him, and I assume the guy in front of him, which is in reality an enemy, is a friendly who just shot this guy down. But taking a nice wide, slow turn, assessing the situation, rolling in, not yanking on the stick, but you can see how she moves when she's fast. Now we're coming back in. Scrubby's repositioned himself as well. We see a furball on the deck, but you can see that target to the right, high. I'm going to prosecute that because you always want to take, obviously, the highest target because it's the biggest threat to you in most situations. I'm pretty sure throughout, right up until I get on this guy's tail, that it's a FW-190A. In reality, it's a Tiffy, and my really crappy long-range PID skills start to show here. Like by right now, I should be able to recognize that wing, but I'm a little skeptical, and I don't realize it's a Tiffy. I think it's a 190, especially as this angle starts to come up. However, I see his cannon blisters, and I realize it's a Tiffy after that. I've lost sight on the rest of the furball because I've chased that guy up, but I see shots coming in on the deck. Sorry, so I slot in, and I see a aircraft cartwheel into the ground followed by another one, and I'm assuming that's a friendly and an enemy who went in. I'm checking out this target. I can tell it's friendly because of the flak going up, but I always like to check that because sometimes there might be an enemy behind them that you can't see. But there's nobody on him, and as I turn out, I do find an actual enemy contact. This guy's disengaged from the fight a bit earlier, and he looks kind of slow, so we're going to prosecute through to him. I'm going to dive, pick up a little bit more speed. I don't see this, I don't think this guy sees me, sorry. And I check my 6, always check 6, huge thing while in combat. Getting jumped is never a nice thing. This guy is seemingly slow. I bet he did some sort of weird, floppy 190 maneuver that they do, and he's bled most of his energy. He's outbound over the channel, so pretty easy slot. Clearly doesn't know we're here. No attempt to maneuver out of our way. So, like the guy previously, this man is about to find out why the P-38 nose-mounted weaponry is so powerful. And there we go. Splash 190. Like I said, it took me some time to get that kill. I had to be patient. I couldn't yank back on the stick. But in the end, we got it. We got our tally. I'm diving out. I want to pick up a little bit more speed because somebody is calling that there are more enemies in the area. I see somebody slotting me. Surprise, it's the Tiffy. But I don't know that, so I'm trying to extend out, get a little bit more speed before I turn in. By this point, I've ID'd it's a Tiffy, but I'm still going to run out over the channel, get some speed so I can convert it into altitude and re-engage later. So while we watch the third-person view of that last kill, I just want to reiterate a couple things. So remember, you have pretty good cornering speed at about 280 miles per hour, but don't engage in an extended maneuvering fight. Try to be really conscious of your energy state and try to be actively doing as much as you can to rebuild energy, or at least gain space so that you have the potential to rebuild energy after a fight or after any kind of high energy intensive maneuver. Another thing I want to remind everybody is just to not get super sucked into diving fights because most airplanes will outdive you. Now here's the last thing I have to show you, and this is the kind of cool thing to cap it off. I don't know if there's maybe a super lesson in the P-38 here, but there's certainly a lesson in outnumbered dogfighting. So I'm up at about 25,000 feet in the P-38 in a 1945 situation, a spring of 1945 situation. So there's the potential for me to see Doras and also to see 262s. And so I'm checking my 6, and I get 2 contrails slightly above me. They seem to have just merged, and neither one is engaging the other. So whatever they are, chances are that they're friendly to each other, maybe not friendly to me. And I get a little nervous here. These things look to be fast. They are at an altitude advantage, and that means they're at an energy advantage. I don't like to take fights in which I'm at the energy disadvantage in the P-38. And I am certainly in the energy disadvantage to that, which is a 262, which is just screamed by me. So I'm assuming whatever else is over there is German. At this altitude, it's got to be either another 262 or maybe a Dora. He's non-factor on me, though. He's turned out. I don't think he realized that his friend engaged something. So he's given me enough space to be able to deal with the 262, and then I can move to engage him. Yet again, I'm just checking, updating. I know where the 262 is. The 262 is going to take a hot second to turn, so I'm going to make sure that the Dora is still turning out what I'm assuming is a Dora, given that I don't know who else would bring up, a late war German prop up to this altitude. And now I've got, I don't have to worry about whatever it is behind me, so I can turn into this 262, and I think this 262 is somewhat of a new player, just from what happens later on, but he didn't play this super stupid here. He didn't try to, just pull on the stick until he was on my tail, which would have, resulted in him dying very quickly. Head-to-head dogfight against this guy, I'll take it. He's got better armament, but I seem to have the better aim, even though that was some very poor aim. I hit something there in his engine, and he starts to turn out. I can tell he's leaking something, so there's some damage. I've managed to get enough space, or to force him to give me enough space to go check out his friend here. Now, I always recommend in these situations to fly it, to get space from one airplane to engage the other one, and just rock back and forth like that. So engage one, get one to pull away from you, and then engage two, get that guy to pull away from you, and do that until you end up getting a kill, and then it's in a 1v1 scenario. So here comes this target, whatever it is. At this point, I've ID'd it's a Dora. Yet again, another heads up. I get a couple hits there into his engine. That 262, whatever I hit, has it's only deteriorated. I think he's miscontrolled his engines, and that's made it worse. That airplane does not have enough energy to come up here and chase me, so he is non-factor right now. I wouldn't, I'd be surprised if he wasn't almost falling out of the sky right now. He's diving to try to pick up some more energy, but he's not a threat to me right now, which is great. That means I can now deal with this Dora all by myself. That's 1262 out. He neither has to RTB, or I'll clean him up after I deal with this Dora. Now the Dora is going to be a challenge because the Dora is much better at this altitude than I am, but I hit something in his engine, I think, so I'm just able to bring the airplane up over the nose. He looks pretty slow right here, and so I'm just going to give her a little bit more rudder. Like I was talking about earlier, the P-38 is really responsive to rudder, and I'm going to use a little bit of the vertical, try to build up a little bit more speed, because I burned some of the speed coming over his nose. This is a really lazy wide turn, so I think he probably also has some sort of wing damage to go with whatever engine damage I did to him as well. Yet again, here's an example of just managing the amount of AOA the airplane can pull. I slot into him right here while still holding pretty good speed, and I'm going to start to take some pretty high deflection shots. I think I hit something else right there. I wouldn't be surprised if that severely injured his pilot because he stopped turning, and then that's a nice shot right on the engine. He's burning up, and he'll go in. I go to search for the 262, and the 262 isn't there, and I check my stats, and I have a kill, and I didn't have a kill prior to finding these two guys, so that's one 262 kill in the 38, and it's about to be a Dora kill, so that's a nice 2v1 at about 25,000 feet, beating two airplanes that are significantly better at that altitude than I am. Well, guys, with that fun ending, that's the end of my little guide on the P-38. A preliminary, very scratching the surface of the airplane's combat capabilities, but I think a rough guide that will help people improve a little bit in their lightning. Remember the critical things to keep your speed up. Remember that you can turn pretty well from about 290 to 280 miles per hour down to about 200. But you shouldn't always. Remember to be conscious of your energy state and conscious of how you're going to be building your energy state back up. And always, the most important thing, remember to check your 6. See you around, guys. Have a good time.